Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Today is kind of special for me, simply because we're going to be starting a new it's going to be a short series, but it's going to be Liddell Hart's book on strategy. Now this is actually special for me because when I was young, when I was in high school, my history teacher had a bookshelf in the classroom that you could just borrow a book from. And that's the first book I borrowed from him, was Liddell Hart's book, Strategy. And it was really neat. The thing that stuck in my mind for all these years wasn't all the historical review that's in there. It wasn't him building the case for his summary, I'll basically call it. But it was the summary itself. As a matter of fact, in this book, for all that material, there's really only 2.5 pages maybe that you really need to read. That's nice and concise. So I'm not going to be covering it all in one sitting. What he had done, he actually puts together in his theory, he uses his history as evidence, and he builds the case for what he calls the 8 maxims of war. So these are kind of like axioms or truths, if you will, strategy. And so we're going to cover this in 8 videos, okay? Because I want to dive into each one individually and really see if we can mine it for all it's worth. But there's a little bit of background, so this video will be a little bit longer because I'm going to talk a little bit about Liddell. And I'm going to preface this video series with this one fact. There's some controversy surrounding Liddell Hart, and I don't know if it's warranted. I'm not here to make those decisions. It doesn't really matter to me. But Liddell Hart is a military veteran. I mean, he came up the ranks. I believe he reached the rank of captain. He knows the stuff. He has these theories. A lot of them, if you have sat through and enjoyed my series on Sun Tzu, you'll notice a lot of overlap, okay? And that's very good. It's always good to be able to see how different writers, different theorists, military strategists have kind of encapsulated ideas and put them into words. A lot of it, this is military science. Now, there's art to it as well, but there is a science to this. And so there is going to be some similarities. And who knows, maybe the way Liddell Hart explains it, maybe that's easier to understand than Sun Tzu or someone else. Okay, so I personally don't care about any of the controversy, and I'm not going to go into that in this video. I don't think it's fair to Liddell especially. Let's just look at what he has to say and does it make sense? And that's what I encourage all of you to do, is when you're out looking at different military theory books and writers, don't get caught up in the arguments about, well, who's right, what were their motives, what are they thinking about. Don't get involved in controversy. Just read what they're saying and see, does it make sense? How does it match with some of the other things that others have said? Because if you really look at it, they're pretty much all agree. Now, there are going to be different levels of strategy, small unit tactics to large theater of war tactics, right? But a lot of the concepts overlap. And there may be a certain nugget in there that will help you become better as a gamer. So throw a lot of that controversy aside. Don't let it bother you. Just look at their work for what it is. And I think that's how we should all treat these. And don't just focus on I'll call the good guys, the people from your side, whatever yours happens to be. So if you happen to be from a part of the world where, let's use a couple examples. There are going to be Russian, German, Austrian, French, German, I said German, U.S., British, Japanese, Chinese, all these different countries. They're all going to have their strategists. It doesn't matter what side of whatever war they were on. It doesn't matter. It's all military theory. And it has some application, right? Let's learn from it. So let's get started with these 8 maxims. Alright, so Now, here's the first one. Okay. Now, just preface, there's 6 positive and 2 negative. So it's like do this, 6 do this, and 2 don't do this. So let's start with number 1. Adjust your end to your means. Simple sentence. Okay. But he goes on for a whole paragraph, so let's go ahead and read the whole thing. All right. In determining your object or objective, clear sight and cool calculation should prevail. It is folly to bite off more than you can chew, and the beginning of military wisdom is a sense of what is possible. So learn to face facts while still preserving faith. There will be ample need for faith, the faith that can achieve the apparently impossible when action begins. Confidence is like the currency in a the current in a battle. Avoid exhausting it in vain effort. And remember that your own continued confidence will be of no avail if the cells of your battery, the men upon which you depend, have been run down. All right, so let's translate that to the tabletop. Let's go, just kind of read it, portions of this in tabletop terms. So, it still makes sense in determining your objective. Clear sight and cool calculation should prevail. It is possible to bite off more than you can chew, and you should remain a sense of what is possible, okay? You need to face the facts, look at what's actually happening in front of you on the tabletop, what's in your force, what's in your opponent's force, who has initiative, who has what abilities or not, what are the terrain advantages, all those things. If you remember in several of my Sun Tzu videos, we talked about the estimation and calculation and risk assessment as part of military science. So this is what he's talking about here. Okay, you need to have that. Now, confidence is like the current in a battery. Avoid exhausting it. And remember that to have continued confidence will be of no avail if the cells of your battery, the models on the table, they have been run down. Okay, so essentially what he's talking about here goes a lot to what several points that Sun Tzu made. Be realistic in what your objectives are. Sometimes you're going to be in a position with the force that you have, whether it's the design of the scenario or just the luck of the draw, the way you are facing your opponent. Your force will be capable of certain things, but not others. Your opponents will have the same problem. They'll be able to do certain things, and they'll not be able to do other things. Now, some lists can do a lot of things, okay? Others, different abilities. Try to be realistic in your assessment and have confidence in what your ability with those units can you accomplish what goals. Don't try to go after things that you're not really capable of in the force that you have. Okay, your army, the list you bring to the table, may not be the best suited for the mission at hand. So don't try to make it into a force or try to use it in such a way to do that. For example, if you are going to need, in order to achieve certain objectives within the game, speed, a lot of fast units to get to certain locations quickly, and you just don't have that, you just don't try to, don't make it happen, don't waste your energy trying to make up for that, okay? There may be other objectives in the battle that you could use or take advantage of that your army is more capable of. It could be, honestly, destroying your opponent. There are times when the objective is the occupation of something, times when it's the securing of a particular thing, maybe even moving it somewhere. Other times it is the stopping of an opponent's movement somewhere, otherwise, or just completely killing them as much. There's all these different kinds of objectives. Now, your army may not be able to do all of those, and hopefully your scenario has a few different objective possibilities. Okay, maybe like there's primary objectives, secondary objectives, and you may need to realize that some of those primaries you're not going to be able to get, or some of those secondaries you can't get because your army isn't really equipped to handle that well and still do the other stuff. Because what he's trying to get to you is that if you stretch your army too thin to do too much, especially if it's not well suited to some of those objectives, it's going to fall apart, and you're going to have even less of an army left to do more with. So it doesn't matter how much confidence you've got. If you lost half your army because you misused it, you're in a bad spot. Okay, so what are the ways you need to look at your army? What is it capable of? How is it at shooting long range? We'll look at it in terms of artillery support kind of thing. It doesn't have to be artillery support, but you're looking at long range across the table affecting the enemy unit. How are you in just shooting? How are you in close combat? How are you in movement? Okay. What are things abilities do you have that could interrupt your opponent or take away advantages of your opponent? Or what are the things that your army has that make it possible for it to achieve an objective or prevent your opponent from reaching that objective? Okay. That's what you're trying to do. Assess your army with those things in mind and make the decision what objectives you're actually going to be able to pursue given the nature of the army you've got. Okay? So that's the first maxim that Liddell is talking about. Essentially, adjust your ends to the means. Okay? So I hope you learned something in that video. It's, again, a different perspective, but it's just the foundation, the first foundation. We got to take all 8 of these things together, not just one here. So stick with me for the next 7 weeks as we go through this, and hopefully you'll learn something a little bit, and maybe this will make a little more sense to you than maybe some other things you've been hearing. Let me know below what you think, and please share, like, and subscribe. I'll talk to you, or see you in the next video. All right, bye-bye.